My mother blew my college fund for my stepbrother, so I moved out and cut them off. 3 years later, my stepdad bailed, his son went to jail, and my mom wants to reconcile. Hey Reddit. My family blew up my college fund to pay for my stepbrother's business venture. So, I left, went no contact, and moved in with my uncle, built my own life. 3 years later, my mother called. Here's what went down. So, this story starts when I'm 8 years old, standing next to a hospital bed watching my dad die of cancer. Heavy, right? But here's the thing. My dad was a legend. Even while dying, 3 days before he kicked the bucket, he called me over and handed me a bank book. "This is your college fund, kiddo," he said, his voice all raspy from the chemo. "Started it the day you were born. There's $28,000 in there now, and your mom's going to keep adding to it until you're ready for college. This is your future. Don't let anyone touch it." I was 8. I didn't understand money or college or much of anything really, but I understood promises, and my dad never broke a promise. He died 2 days later. Mom was devastated, obviously. Single mother with an 8-year-old kid, working as a nurse, trying to figure out how to be everything at once, but she kept that promise religiously. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time she got a raise, money went into that account. We'd made it into this ritual where she'd show me the balance, and we'd talk about what I wanted to study. "Your dad would be so proud," she'd say. "He always said you were going to be something special." By the time I hit high school, that account had grown to over $60,000. Dad's initial investment, plus mom's contributions, plus compound interest. It was my security blanket, my guaranteed ticket out of our working-class neighborhood. While other kids worried about college debt, I knew I was covered. Mom used to brag about it to her friends. My late husband may have died young, but he made sure his son would go to college. That's what real fathers do. She'd get this proud, looked like she was carrying on some sacred mission. I worked my ass off in school because I knew Dad was watching somehow. 3.8 GPA, robotics club president, mathletes champion, the whole 9 yards. Other kids called me a tard. I called it honoring my father's investment. Mom was my biggest cheerleader back then. Parent-teacher conferences, school events, college, prep meetings, she was always there, always supportive. "We're going to get you into the best engineering school money can buy," she'd say. "Your dad would settle for nothing less." This went on for years, Mom and me against the world, building toward my future, protecting Dad's legacy. Every deposit slip was like a love letter from beyond the grave. Every conversation about college was like Dad was still there, still planning, still believing in me. Man, was I naive. I thought loyalty was genetic. I thought promises outlived the people who made them. I thought my mother understood that stealing from that account would be like pissing on my father's grave. I was wrong about all of that. When I turned 15, Mom started dating again. Fine, whatever, she deserved to be happy. And I wasn't some mama's boy who couldn't handle her having a life. But Jesus Christ, did she have to pick such a walking stereotype? Enter Richard Morrison. And yeah, that's his real name because protecting this asshole's identity. Richard was everything. My dad wasn't. Dad was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of guy who read books and taught me chess. Richard was loud, controlling, and had opinions about everything despite knowing nothing about anything. He managed a cell phone store, not owned, managed, at 45 years old. This was his peak achievement. He drove a leased BMW he couldn't afford, wore gold chains like he was auditioning for a mob movie, and called everyone chief or buddy, in that condescending way that immediately tells you someone's an insecure underscore. But Mom made it up. Richard had this way of making her feel taken care of. After years of handling everything alone, he'd swoop in with his loud voice and bigger presence, making decisions about restaurants and TV shows and weekend plans. "It's nice having a man around the house again," she'd say, which was basically a kick to my dead father's memory. Richard came with baggage, his 16-year-old son. Ian. Ian was like if you took every entitled suburban kid stereotype and concentrated it into pure essence. This kid had never worked a day in his life, but somehow always had money for expensive sneakers and the latest iPhone. He had this smugness that screamed, "Daddy fixes all my problems." Ian failed everything, but acted like school was beneath him. "I'm more of an entrepreneur," he'd say, which meant he sold vape cartridges to middle schoolers and called it business experience. The kid couldn't pass basic math, but talked about his future empire like he was the next Elon Musk. The worst part about Ian wasn't just his laziness, it was his complete lack of self-awareness. This kid would blow off homework to play video games, then lecture me about working smarter, not harder, while I studied for AP Calculus. He'd borrow $20 for lunch money and never pay it back, then complain about how the system was rigged against entrepreneurs like him. From day one, Richard tried to establish dominance in our house, started rearranging furniture, criticizing how Mom ran things, making suggestions about my schedule and activities. "The boy spends too much time studying," he'd tell Mom. "Kids need balance, sports, social activities. All this book learning is making him software, right?" because apparently grinding toward a 4.0 GPA was somehow less masculine than Ian's hobby of getting suspended for vaping in the bathroom. Richard also had weird hang-ups about money. He'd make comments about our modest lifestyle and how a real man provides better for his family. Never mind that Mom owned the house outright thanks to Dad's life insurance and had been managing fine for years. Richard needed to be the provider. Even though he was basically a broke middle manager playing dress-up, the control got worse after they got married. Suddenly Richard had opinions about everything: what groceries we bought, what shows we watched, how late I could stay up on weekends. He installed himself as the man of the house and expected everyone to fall in line. "Your mother has been doing this alone too long," he'd say. "Time for some structure around here." Structure. Like Richard's idea of order was somehow superior to the system that had worked perfectly fine for 7 years. Ian, meanwhile, was a one-man wrecking crew. He'd eat food Mom bought specifically for my school lunches, use my computer without asking, take my charges and never return them. When I'd complain, Richard would hit me with that "boys will be boys _ You need to learn to share," Richard would say. "Ian's your brother now. Family shares everything, brother." Right, because living in the same house for 5 minutes made us family. The breaking point came when Ian borrowed my graphing calculator for a math test and managed to lose it. This thing cost $120 and I needed it for my AP classes. When I asked where it was, Ian shrugged and said he probably left it somewhere. Richard's response: "These things happen. Maybe you shouldn't have let him borrow it." The worst part was watching Mum change. She'd gone from being my teammate to being Richard's lieutenant. Decisions that used to be ours were now Richard's. College planning sessions turned into family discussions where Richard's opinion somehow mattered as much as mine. "We should look at more affordable options," Richard would say. "In-state schools, maybe community college first to save money." From the guy who leased a BMW and bought $200 sneakers for his failure son every month, I started keeping track of the little power plays, the control moves, the way Richard was slowly taking over our lives. But I figured it was temporary adjustment stuff, new family dynamics, everyone finding their place. I had no idea he was already planning to loot my future. Junior year is when Richard really showed his true colors. I'm 17, working part-time at a local computer repair shop, saving money for college expenses beyond tuition. Good kid doing good things. Right. Wrong. Richard saw my paychecks as an opportunity. "You know what, Tyler," Richard announced at dinner one night, like he'd been mulling over some great philosophical question. "I think it's time you started contributing to the household." I looked up from my meatloaf. "Contributing how?" "Rent," he said, cutting his meat like he was dissecting the concept. "You're almost 18, you've got a job, and you're living here for free. Time to learn some responsibility." My mom's fork stopped halfway to her mouth, but he's still in high school. "So was I when I started paying my old man rent," Richard said. "Did me good. Taught me the value of hard work and money. This kid's been coddled too long." The kid who'd been maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working weekends was apparently coddled. "How much?" I asked, because I could see where this was heading. $300 a month, fair market rate for a room. 300. I was making $400 a month working part-time. Richard wanted 75% of my income as rent for living in the house my mother owned, in the room I'd been sleeping in since I was 8 years old. "That's insane," I said. "I'm in high school. I'm saving for college." Richard's face hardened. "Life's expensive, Chief. Better you learn that now than later. Besides, Ian's been helping out around here too." Ian's idea of helping was occasionally taking out the trash after being asked 6 times. But somehow my academic achievements and actual job weren't enough contribution. Mom looked uncomfortable, but didn't back me up. "Maybe we could work out something smaller." 300, Richard said firmly. "That's what adults pay for housing." I wasn't an adult when they needed me to babysit Ian, or help with chores, or maintain perfect grades to make the family look good. But I was an adult when they wanted my money. Richard wrapped this obvious money grab in life lessons about responsibility and preparation for the real world. Like paying rent to live in my own home was somehow character building. Your real dad would want you to learn financial responsibility. Richard had the balls to say that. The man who died specifically to make sure I wouldn't have financial stress in college. Richard was using my dead father to justify robbing me. Ian, of course, wasn't paying rent. Different situation. Richard explained. Ian's grades need work. Can't burden him with financial stress while he's struggling academically, right? Ian got a free ride because he was failing, but I had to pay rent because I was succeeding. The logic was flawless. I tried to appeal to Mom privately. Found her folding laundry one evening and laid out the math. $300 in rent meant I'd have $100 a month left over. No savings, no emergency fund, no extra money for college applications or SAT prep materials. "I know it seems like a lot," she said, not meeting my eyes. "But Richard thinks it's important for your development, and we could use the help with household expenses." The woman who'd managed fine as a single mother for 8 years suddenly needed her high school son's rent money to make ends meet. What about my college fund? I asked. Dad specifically set that up so I wouldn't have financial stress. The college fund is for college, she said. This is about learning to be an adult. I paid the first month's rent because I didn't have a choice. Handed over $300 of my hard-earned money to live in my own bedroom. Richard made a big show of giving me a receipt, like this was some legitimate landlord-tenant transaction. See, it wasn't so hard, he said. You'll thank me for this someday. Ian smirked from the couch where he was playing video games on the PlayStation. Richard had bought him for Christmas. Welcome to the real world, bro. Yeah, sure. The real world where failing students lived rent-free while honor students that got financially extorted by their own families. That's when I started documenting everything. Every rent payment, every underscore justification, every double standard. I kept receipts, recorded conversations, and noted every time Ian got a pass for behavior that would have gotten me punished. I also started planning my escape, because if Richard wanted to treat me like a tenant instead of a stepson, I'd start thinking like a tenant. And tenants don't stick around when the rent's too high and the landlord's an underscore. What I didn't know was that the rent was just the appetizer. Richard was already eyeing the main course, my college fund. Senior year. Acceptance letters started rolling in. MIT said yes. Freaking MIT, the dream school my dad and I had talked about since middle school. The place where real engineers were made. I was floating on air for about 12 hours. Then came the financial reality check. We need to talk about college costs, Mom said, sitting me down at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. These schools are more expensive than we expected. College costs were some mysterious force that had suddenly changed overnight. MIT's total cost was about $75,000 a year. Expensive as hell, but the college fund was sitting at $78,000 thanks to Dad's early start and Mom's years of contributions. With my part-time job savings and some financial aid, it was doable. Tight, but doable. Let me log into the account and see exactly where we stand, I said, pulling out my laptop. The look that passed between Mom and Richard should have been my first clue. Quick panic, like they'd been caught at something actually. Mom said, her voice weird and strained. There have been some changes to the account recently. Changes? What kind of changes? I logged in anyway, and that's when my world exploded. Balance, $23,847. I stared at that number for a full minute, thinking there had to be some mistake, some banking error, some wrong account, some glitch in the system. There should have been nearly $80,000 there. Was less than $24,000 what the underscore happened to my money? I said, my voice deadly quiet. Language, Richard snapped, but I was way past caring about his house rules. Where's my college fund? I asked again. Looking directly at Mom, that's when the excuses started flowing. Ian had needed emergency funding for a special program. Richard's store had hit some rough patches and they'd needed to borrow against the account temporarily. There had been some medical expenses not covered by insurance. All lies. All obvious, desperate lies told by people who'd been caught red-handed stealing from me. How much? I asked. How much what? Mom said. Still playing dumb. How much did you steal for Ian? Richard's face went red. Nobody stole anything. We borrowed from family resources to help another family member. It's called priorities. Right. Ian's priorities had cost me $54,000 of my dead father's money. That's when Ian himself wandered in from the living room, probably drawn by the raised voices. He took one look at my laptop screen and had the balls to smirk. That, he said casually. Yeah, Dad helped me get into this entrepreneurship program. It's like college, but better. More hands-on, real-world experience. Cost a bit up front, but I'll make it back easy. I found out later this program was basically a pyramid scheme selling energy drinks and motivational courses. Ian had blown through $54,000 of my inheritance in 8 months learning how to scam people. The business involved buying overpriced inventory, attending weekend seminars led by guys in cheap suits, and pestering everyone you knew to join your team. Ian actually tried to recruit me once about a month before I discovered the theft. Came into my room with this glossy brochure and started pitching me on passive income streams and being your own boss. I told him it sounded like a scam. He called me a wage slave who didn't understand business. You can still go to college, Mom said desperately. Just maybe somewhere more affordable. The state school has a good engineering program. State school. After maintaining a 3.8 GPA, after getting into MIT, after working my ass off for years, they wanted me to settle for state school because they'd pissed away my college fund on Ian's get-rich-quick fantasy. You promised, I said, looking at Mom. You promised Dad you'd protect that money. You promised me it would be there when I needed it. Plans change, Richard said. Life happens. You'll figure something out. Smart kids always do. Like my intelligence somehow made their theft acceptable. Ian needed a chance, Mom said, and she was crying now. He was struggling, and this program could change his life. You've got options. You've got scholarships. I had options because I'd worked for them. Ian had gotten a free ride because he was a screw-up who needed chances. I closed my laptop and looked at these people who I'd thought were my family. Mom, who'd broken the most sacred promise she'd ever made. Richard, who'd orchestrated the whole thing because he couldn't stand the idea of his stepson having advantages his own son didn't. You chose him over me, I said finally. You took money my father died to give me and handed it to someone who's never earned anything in his life. It wasn't like that, Mom protested. Double quotes. Yes, it was exactly like that. You chose Eon's wants over my needs. You chose Richard's pride over Dad's promise. You chose to betray your own son. I stood up and headed for my room. Richard tried to block my path. Where do you think you're going? He demanded. To make a phone call, I said, to someone who actually gives a underscore about honoring my father's memory. You're not calling anyone, Richard said. We'll handle this as a family. This family had just stolen my future and sold it to fund Eon's delusions. I pushed past Richard and went to my room, locked the door, grabbed my phone, and called the one person I knew would understand exactly how underscore up this situation was: my Uncle Rick, Dad's brother. The one person in the world who loved my father as much as I did, and who'd always thought Mom was making a mistake with Richard. Time to see if blood was really thicker than water. Uncle Rick picked up on the second ring. Hey kiddo, what's up? I'd always been close with Uncle Rick. He was Dad's younger brother. Looked exactly like him, but with more tattoos and a motorcycle, where Dad had been the responsible engineer. Rick was the free spirit who owned a successful auto shop and didn't take underscore from anyone. Mom had always been weird around him, something about him being a bad influence and living in the past. Now, I knew why she'd always tried to keep us apart. Rick was the one person who'd call out her underscore without hesitation. Uncle Rick, I said, and my voice cracked. They stole it. They stole Dad's college fund. The silence on the other end was deadly. When Rick finally spoke, his voice was ice cold. Tell me everything right now. I laid it all out. The whole story, from Richard's arrival to Eon's entrepreneurship program to the $24,000 left in an account that should have had $78,000. Rick didn't interrupt once, just listened while I explained how my own family had robbed my future. When I finished, the silence stretched for nearly a minute. Those freaking parasites, Rick finally said. Your dad is rolling in his grave right now. He worked overtime for 2 years straight to start that fund, died believing your mom would protect it. It felt so good to hear someone else say it, to have someone validate that this wasn't just teenage drama or family disagreement. This was straight up theft. What do? I asked. First, you get every piece of documentation you can. Bank statements, emails, recordings if you can manage it. This might end up legal. Second, you pack your important stuff. Third, you tell those exactly what they are. I can't just leave. I'm still in high school. The hell you can't. You're 18 in 3 months. You've got a job and I've got a spare bedroom. Plus your mom's about to find out what happens when you screw with a Morrison. Are you sure? I asked. Kid, your dad made me promise to look out for you if anything happened to him. I've been watching your mom make bad choices for years, waiting for you to need me. Will you need me now? An hour later, Uncle Rick's Harley was rumbling in our driveway. I heard him before I saw him. The bike was loud enough to wake the dead, which was probably intentional. Rick believed in making an entrance. I came downstairs to find Mom and Richard in full panic mode. They'd heard the bike and knew exactly who it was. You called Rick? Mom asked, like I'd summoned Satan himself. I called my uncle, I said. You remember him, right? The one who actually cares about protecting Dad's legacy. The doorbell rang. Richard started toward it, but I was faster. Rick stood on our porch looking like every suburban parent's nightmare. 6'2", covered in tattoos, wearing leather and an expression that could melt steel. But when he saw me, his face softened. Hey kiddo, he said, pulling me into a hug. You okay? I am now, I said. Rick walked into the living room like he owned the place. Mom and Richard were standing there, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Patricia, Rick said to my mom, his voice polite, but with an edge that could cut glass. Richard, heard you've been playing fast and loose with my brothers. Money. Now wait just a minute, Richard started, puffing up. Rick looked at him the way you'd look at a particularly annoying insect. No, you wait. You and your worthless son just stole $54,000 from this kid. Money his father died to give him. So here's how this is going to work. Richard opened his mouth to argue, but Rick held up a hand. I'm talking now. You screwed up. You took money that wasn't yours, gave it to a kid who's never earned anything in his life, and broke a promise to a dead man. Now you're going to face the consequences. That money was for the family, Mom said, finding her voice. Ian is family now. Rick laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family? Eon's been here. What? 3 years? Tyler's been your son for 18, but somehow the kid who just showed up gets the inheritance. It's more complicated than that, Richard said. No, it's not. It's simple as hell. You're a broke loser who married a woman with money in the bank, then convinced her to steal from her own kid to fund your son's underscore. You're a parasite, and parasites eventually get cut off. The room went dead silent. Richard tried to bluster about family dynamics and complex situations, but Rick shut him down with a look. You want to know what's complex? Rick said. Working double shifts for 8 years to honor a promise to your dead husband. That's complex. Stealing from your kid to fund a pyramid scheme. That's just pathetic. We can work this out, Mom said desperately. As a family, Rick turned to me. Get your stuff, Tyler. You're done here. You can't just take him, Richard said, trying to reassert some authority. Watch me, Rick said. I'm his uncle. He's practically 18, and these people just committed theft. Tyler, you want to leave with me? I looked at Mom one last time. She was crying. Please don't do this, she whispered. I'm still your mother. No, I said. You were my mother. Now you're just the woman who stole my father's legacy. I went upstairs and packed everything that mattered: clothes, laptop, important documents, the photo of Dad and me at my 8th grade graduation. Everything else could stay. It all felt contaminated now anyway. When I came back downstairs, Rick was giving them one final message. Here's what's going to happen, he told them. You're going to leave Tyler alone. No calls, no visits, no guilt trips. You made your choice when you stole that money. Now live with it. And if we don't? Richard asked, trying to sound tough. Rick smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Then you'll find out what happens when you mess with family. We loaded my stuff onto Rick's truck. He'd brought the truck instead of the bike for practical reasons. As we pulled out of the driveway, I looked back at the house where I'd grown up, where I'd planned my future. You made the right choice, kid, Rick said. Your dad would be proud as hell. For the first time in months, I believed that. What was true? Living with Uncle Rick was like discovering what a real family felt like. No manipulation, no control games, no double standards, just straight talk and mutual respect. Rick treated me like an adult, probably because I'd been forced to become one. His house was small but comfortable, a 2-bedroom place near his auto shop with a garage full of motorcycle parts and classic car projects. My room was basically his office converted with a bed and desk, but it felt more like home than my old house had in years. Rules are simple, Rick told me the first night. Keep your grades up, help out around the shop when you can, and don't bring any drama to my door. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. No rent, no arbitrary restrictions, no stepbrother eating my food or using my underscore, just basic respect and common sense. When I offered to pay rent, Rick laughed. Your dad would beat my ass if I charged his kid to live here, he said. You want to contribute, get good grades and help me rebuild that Camaro engine. That's payment enough. I threw myself into school and work with laser focus, graduated valedictorian, which felt like a massive middle finger to everyone who'd thought stealing my future would break me. Rick was in the front row at graduation, hooting and hollering like I'd just won the Super Bowl. Might was still out of reach financially, but I'd applied to other schools with my new sob story about family theft. Turns out colleges love underdog narratives, especially when they're well documented. I got into a solid engineering program with enough financial aid to make it work. Rick helped me set up a new bank account that only I had access to. Never again, he said. Your money, your control, your future. I also got a better job working at Rick's shop. Turns out all those years of studying had given me a good technical foundation, and Rick was happy to teach me the practical side. I was making twice what I'd made at the computer store and actually learning skills that would matter in the real world. The best part was that Rick kept me updated on the family drama I'd left behind. He had ways of finding things out: small-town networks, mutual friends, the occasional reconnaissance mission disguised as business trips. Eon's entrepreneurship program had collapsed exactly like anyone with 2 brain cells could have predicted. Pyramid schemes always do. He'd blown through all the money, failed to make anything back, and was now living at home, unemployed and bitter. The $54,000 might as well have been flushed down the toilet. Richard and Mom's marriage was cracking under the financial pressure. Turns out when you base a relationship on shared delusions, reality has a way of breaking things apart. Richard was working extra hours trying to cover the bills. Mom was working double shifts to make up for the missing college fund money. And Ian was contributing exactly nothing except attitude and increasingly serious drug habits. They're drowning, Rick reported after one of his intelligence-gathering missions. Richard's talking about declaring bankruptcy. Mom's picked up a 3rd job, and Ian got arrested for shoplifting. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, it just felt inevitable. You can't build a life on stealing from others and expect it to last. Meanwhile, I was thriving. College was challenging, but manageable. My grades were good, and I was making connections that would matter for my career. I had also started dating Sarah, a pre-med student who thought my family drama story was kind of badass. Actually, Sarah was smart, driven, actually going somewhere in life. When I told her about the college fund theft, she got genuinely angry. On my behalf, 2 years into college, I got an internship at a tech company that paid more than Mom made as a nurse. The irony wasn't lost on me. The kid they'd written off as figuring something out was out-turning the adults who'd stolen his future. Rick was proud as hell. Your dad's looking down, laughing his ass off. He said, his kids succeeding despite their best efforts to sabotage him. I was starting to feel like maybe I'd actually won. I'd escaped their toxicity, built my own life, and was succeeding without their help or approval. The anger was fading, replaced by indifference and mild pity. That's when Mom decided she wanted back in. 3 years after I'd walked out, my phone rang with Mom's number. I'd kept it unblocked for emergencies, but this was the first time she'd called since I'd left. Tyler. Her voice was older, more tired. Can we talk? I was in my apartment near campus, studying for finals. 3 years of independence had been good to me. I was confident, successful, and completely unburdened by their drama. What's up, Patricia? I said, using her first name deliberately. I know you're angry with us, she started. I'm not angry, I said, which was true. Anger implies I still care enough to be affected by your choices. I don't. Another pause. I could hear her breathing, probably trying to figure out how to spin whatever crisis had prompted this call. Richard and I are getting divorced, she said finally. Congratulations. Smart choice. About 3 years too late. It's been hard. Ian's been in and out of jail, drug possession, theft, probation violations. Richard lost his job and moved in with some woman across town. I'm working 3 jobs just to keep the apartment. She'd lost the house. The house Dad's life insurance had paid for. The house that should have been secure forever. Somehow, that didn't surprise me. That's rough, I said, my voice completely flat. I made mistakes, she continued. I know that now. I should have protected your college fund. I should have put your needs first. I was trying to hold the family together, but I ended up destroying it instead. She was hitting all the right notes. Too bad it was about 3 years and $54,000 too late. Why are you calling me? I want to make things right. I want my son back. Your son is Ian. You've made that choice when you stole my college money to fund his party lifestyle. That's not. I never stopped loving you. You're my firstborn, my baby. I think about you every day. Think about me every day. Right, for 3 years. She'd thought about me every day but never once reached out to apologize. Never tried to make amends. Never showed any interest in my life or success. Now that her other choices had blown up in her face, suddenly I mattered again. I know I have no right to ask, she said, and I could hear her crying, but I need help. I'm about to lose the apartment. I can't afford Ian's lawyer fees. I'm drowning and I don't know where else to turn. There it was, the real reason for the call. She needed money. Let me get this straight, I said. You stole my college fund to enable Ian's failures. That money is gone forever. Ian's now a drug addict criminal. Richard abandoned you when things got tough, and now you want me to bail you out of the consequences of your own choices. I know how it sounds. It sounds like you learned nothing. You're still putting Ian's needs above mine. You're still asking me to sacrifice for people who've never sacrificed for me. You're successful now. You're in college, you've got a good job. I don't need what? A mother who keeps her promises. A family that doesn't steal from me. Basic loyalty from the people who raised me. You're right. I don't need those things. Because I never had them. The silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, probably calculating how much money would solve her problems. Wondering if there was some angle she hadn't tried yet. I could pay you back, she said. Finally, if you could just help me get back on my feet, I could pay you back everything. With what money? She was working 3 jobs just to afford an apartment. Ian was costing her lawyer fees instead of contributing anything. Richard had bailed with whatever assets they'd shared. Your father would want you to help the family, she said finally, and there it was. The nuclear option, using my dead father to guilt me into funding the people who'd betrayed his legacy. Don't, I said, my voice turning dangerous. Don't you dare use Dad to justify this. Dad would be disgusted by what you've become. He'd be ashamed that you broke the promise you made to him. Please. Dad's dead, Patricia. Has been for 10 years. You don't get to speak for him, especially not to ask for money. You'll probably just give it to Ian anyway. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the campus where I was building my future paid for with my own work. Protected by my own choices, free from their dysfunction. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Nothing. You made your choice 3 years ago when you stole my inheritance. Now you get to live with those choices. I can change. No, you can't, because change requires understanding what you did wrong, and you still don't get it. You still think this is about money or forgiveness or family reconciliation. It's not. It's about consequences. You're my son. No, I'm not. I'm the kid who escaped your toxicity and built something better. But I'm not your son. Sons get protection and loyalty. I got robbed and betrayed. I could hear her sobbing now, but it didn't move me the way it might have once. 3 years of independence had taught me that tears without change are just manipulation. I'm hanging up now, I said. Don't call again. Don't show up at my apartment. Don't try to contact me through Rick or anyone else. You wanted Ian so bad. You've got him. Enjoy the consequences. Tyler, please. I hung up and immediately blocked her number. 10 minutes later, Rick called. Let me guess, he said. Patricia tried to crawl back. How'd you know? Because Richard moved out last month. Ian got arrested again yesterday, and she's about 3 weeks from eviction. Desperation makes people reach out to the bridges they burned. She wanted money. Rick snorted. Of course she did. What did you tell her that she made? Her choice, and now she gets to live with it. Good man. Your dad would be proud. We talked for a few more minutes, but my mind was already moving on. I had finals to study for an internship interview next week and plans to make for summer break. Patricia's crisis was her problem, not mine. 2 weeks later, I heard through Rick's network that Patricia had lost the apartment and moved in with her sister across the state. Ian was in county lockup on drug charges. Richard had moved in with his new girlfriend and cut off all contact with his son. Meanwhile, I was thriving. The best part, I'd honored Dad's legacy perfectly. He'd wanted me to get an education and build a successful life. Mission accomplished. The fact that I'd done it without their help despite their sabotage just made it sweeter.